Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 2023 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome everyone. This is item 1, which is a declaration of opening and announcement of visitors. So I declare the meeting open at 3 minutes past 6 p.m. Councillor Glenn Cridland has requested to attend tonight's meeting via telephone. So in accordance with Regulation 14C and 14C of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, I've authorised Councillor Cridland to attend the meeting by electronic means. Councillor Cridland, in accordance with Regulation 14C sub-regulation 5 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, can you maintain confidentiality during the meeting when the meeting goes behind closed doors?
I certainly can. I'm in a room by myself in a hotel in Sydney.
Very good. All right, thank you for that, Councillor Cridland. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, which is me. There's Neil this evening. Item 4 is attendances, and we have received item 4.1, apologies. We have received an apology from Councillor Ken Manolis for this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. Councillor Glenn Cridland has an approved leave of absence for the period of 14 March 2023 to 31 March 2023 inclusive, but he is with us tonight, as you've already heard. Item 5 is declarations of interest, and bear with me because there's a bit to get through here. So, in accordance with authority delegated by the Minister for Local Government on 28 March 2023, approval has been given by the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries under section 5.69 subsection 3 of the Local Government Act 1995 to allow councillors Glenn Cridland, Stephen Russell, Andre Brenderer-Brandis and Jennifer Navard to fully participate in the discussion and decision-making relating to item 10.3.1, Draft Local Planning Scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. This approval is subject to the following conditions. 1. The approval is only valid for the 28 March 2023 Ordinary Council meeting when agenda item 10.3.1 is considered. 2. The above-mentioned councillors must declare the nature and extent of their interests at the above-mentioned meeting when each matter is considered, together with the approval provided. 3. The Chief Executive Officer, CEO, is to provide a copy of the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries letter of approval to the above-mentioned councillors. 4. The CEO is to ensure that the declarations, including the approval given and any conditions imposed, are recorded in the minutes of the above-mentioned meeting when each item is considered. 5. The CEO is to provide a copy of the confirmed minutes of the above-mentioned meeting to the department to allow the department to verify compliance with the conditions of this approval. And 6. The approval is granted based solely on the interests disclosed by the above-mentioned councillors made in accordance with the application. Should other interests be identified, these interests will not be included in this approval and the financial interest provisions of the Act will apply. The interests for which this approval applies are as follows. Councillor Glenn Cridland, financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as changes to land use rules, density codings, development rights and requirements, etc. from TPS 6 to LPS 7 may give rise to a financial gain, loss, benefit or detriment to me or a person that I'm closely associated with. Changes to land use rules, density codings, development rights and requirements, etc. from TPS 6 to LPS 7 will almost certainly affect land adjoining my land. Changes to land use rules, density codings, development rights and requirements, etc. from TPS 6 to LPS 7 will affect my land and land owned by many persons known to me. Councillor Stephen Russell, financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as LPS 7 includes my primary residence and properties of neighbours, friends, colleagues and acquaintances. Councillor Jennifer Navard, financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as this decision will impact my property at 195 Mill Point Road, South Perth. The decision will also impact landholding and rental charges and income for the following categories of residents and tenants: my neighbours, friends, colleagues and acquaintances, Moresby Ward constituents as their elected representative in the City of South Perth. And Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis has a financial interest in item 10.3.1 as I own property and an interest in property in the city for which LPS 7 may impact the commercial property values. So those are the interests for which the approval that I referred to previously applies. The city has also received the following interests. So from myself, that's Mayor Greg Milner, financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as local planning policy scheme 7 affects the zoning or potential use of properties where persons or entities that are closely associated or otherwise associated with me either own the property or have an estate or interest in the property. Those persons and entities include not-for-profit entities that I've previously served on the boards of, not-for-profit entities and incorporated associations that I'm the patron of, not-for-profit entities that my wife has previously served on the committee of, and persons who made donations to my election campaign in 2019. Councillor Nick Warland has declared a financial, direct and indirect, proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as broad consideration of the city's planning rules is likely to have a future financial impact on Como Ward election donors. Broad consideration of the city's planning rules has the potential to have financial impact on the property owner of the house I currently reside at. Broad consideration of the city's planning rules is likely to impact the property I reside at and adjoining properties. Previous employment with the Property Council of Australia until March 2022 included work for property developers, town planners and other associated entities or professions, many of whom operate or have interest in property within the city. And Councillor Ken Manolis declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as a new local planning scheme for the City of South Perth impacts upon the value and development potential of properties in the City of South Perth, including my interest in Unit 231 Coode Street, 193 Mill Point Road, 28 Victoria Street, and our neighbours' homes, as well as the homes of family, friends and acquaintances. Councillor Stephen Russell has also declared an impartiality interest in item 15.1.1 as the defendant is known to me. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. And Councillor Stephen Russell has also declared an impartiality interest in item 15.1.2 as both the complainant and the defendant are known to me. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Councillors, does anyone else have any interest that they wish to declare this evening? That's a no. Councillor Cridland?
No.
No.
Nothing from me.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice, of which there are nil this evening. And item 6.2 is public question time itself. I now open public question time at 6:12 p.m. We have received 9 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting, but before I invite the first questioner to the microphone, I am going to remind everyone that public question time is just that. It's an opportunity to ask public questions. I note that some of the preambles that we've received to the questions tonight are quite long, too long, in fact. So I'm going to ask that you keep the preambles to a bare minimum. I'm afraid we can't allow what are effectively statements or deputations with a question mark on the end. So please do proceed to the questions as quickly as possible. Just a pause for a moment, folks. Sure thing. And I am advised that there was a further declaration of an interest by Councillor Mary Choi, which is a financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1, as I, my immediate and extended family and close friends own multiple properties throughout the city of South Perth, and to which the draft local planning scheme number 7 applies. So that's just a little inclusion on item 5. We're now jumping back to item 6. So, a lot of people asking questions tonight. Please do keep the questions as succinct and as brief as you can. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Barry Drake of South Perth to the microphone. We look forward to your question.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, members of the gallery. My name's Barry Drake. I live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. And my question tonight relates to the undergrounding of the power lines in the South Perth Hurlingham project. Specifically, the way the finance officers of the city have charged some of the multiple property owners, in other words, people who own blocks of flats in that area, which would probably be only about 4 or 5 of us, very few.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. If you could ask a question now, please.
My question relates to that, specifically to the elected members, the councillors. Now, the question is, will the City of South Perth list as an agenda item the South Perth and Hurlingham Underground Power Network charge as it specifically relates to blocks of flats, i.e. buildings that are multiple dwellings with a single title and a single gross rental value on their rates notice?
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Adams, can I send that one your way?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Drake. The City of South Perth underground power schemes adopted by Council for Collier, Manning and South Perth Hurlingham deal with the network charges for properties as they specifically relate to blocks of flats, i.e. buildings that are multiple dwellings with a single title and a single GRV in a uniform manner. Following many workshops and briefing sessions, Council's decision to adopt the schemes was taken with the knowledge of how the underground power network charges would be implemented, and the finance officers have implemented them in accordance with that resolution. The charges for Collier and Manning were adopted as part of the 2021-22 budget, and South Perth Hurlingham as part of the 2022-23 budget. As such, the schemes form part of those respective agendas. The City's administration and council have provided information, explanations and responded to questions regarding this item, and in context of the above, the City will not list a separate agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, and thank you, Mr. Drake, for the question. I'd now like to invite Dr. Mark Brogan of Kensington, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I refer to Category B listed heritage site located at 50 Dyson Street, Kensington, formerly and widely known as the Church of St Martin in the Field and Durbridge Hall. Since Council's affirmation of the Category B heritage listing of this place in December 2021 and its subsequent sale to new owners, a lack of maintenance exists on the site, giving rise to uncertainty about its future. 50 Dyson Street has been unoccupied for some 18 months and has suffered damage and neglect during this period. Recently, a glass door pane was broken, allowing access to the building by anyone, and the potential for further damage, vandalism and vagrancy. As a Category B listed heritage place, these things ideally should not be happening, and residents are seeking assurance that there will be follow-up action from City of South Perth when they do.
Perhaps
So
we can move on to the questions now. Yes, thank you.
The Heritage Regulations 2019 describe the scope and application of repair notices for prevention of damage to heritage places under Part 4. What actions has the City of South Perth taken to address damage, vandalism and vagrancy at this heritage listed place?
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Dr Brogan, for the question. The ability to direct repairs under the Heritage Act 2018 and the Heritage Regulations 2019 applies to a registered place, meaning a place or a property on the State Register of Heritage Places. 50 Dyson Street is not in the State Register, nor is it being considered for inclusion.
Question 2. What information does the City of South Perth have in respect of representations received from the Heritage Council in relation to the City of South Perth's obligations in respect of this local heritage inventory listed place?
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks again, Dr Brogan, for the question. The property was added onto the Heritage Council assessment program in 2012. When a place is on the Heritage Council's assessment program, it means that the Heritage Council has an interest in the place and it will be assessed and considered for inclusion on the State Register of Heritage Places. The Heritage Council has assessed that the property does not meet the criteria for the State Register of Heritage Places and that it be considered for inclusion on the city's local heritage inventory only. The property was subsequently removed from the Heritage Council's assessment program in August 2021.
My final question, Mr Mayor. A year and a half has passed since Council reaffirmed the Category B listing of 50 Dyson Street. Has the City of South Perth received a development application or discussed with the owner development plans for this site, inclusive of the heritage fabric?
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Dr Brogan. The property is currently subject to a development application for a change of use to a child daycare centre with proposed additions and alterations to the existing buildings. This is currently being advertised and the submission period closes on the 5th of April 2023. The City is working with the applicant to ensure the cultural heritage significance is protected, which includes requiring an independent heritage consultant to verify the assessment.
Thank you, Mr Quigley, and thank you, Dr Brogan.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'd now like to invite Mr Peter Scott of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. This evening I'm representing the City of South Perth Residents Association. I'm the Deputy Chair of that organisation. We note the City's desire to divest the Collier Park Village to an alternative operator which has appropriate expertise and resources to manage this facility. We support the notion in principle. However, we are aware that the City has tried on previous occasions to achieve this objective and has been unsuccessful. We understand the vesting of the land has been a stumbling block in the past, and we note the City's report indicates that discussions have commenced with the state government to achieve this outcome. We also have concerns relating to the financial aspects of this move. My first question, the City wants to engage a consultant to pursue a request for proposal before the issue of vesting is resolved with the state government. it would seem more appropriate to achieve a clear outcome in relation to vesting to provide clarity to potential investors on the key issue of land tenure and use. Is jumping straight into an RFP premature, and might it potentially add unnecessarily to costs?
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it won't add to the cost. The city has been consulting with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage regarding the current vesting order and the most appropriate land tenure moving forward since late last year. The type of land tenure proposed is conditional freehold, which means the land will only be freehold while it's used in accordance with the conditions on the title, which is proposed to be for aged persons' homes. This is exactly the same purpose as stated on the current management order. This will be made very clear to any potential proponents as part of the RFP process. Should be remembered that the minister has the final say on what happens to that land, regardless of our process anyway, so it doesn't really change that fact.
Okay, question 2. The legal aspects of vesting of land to freehold title do not seem to be covered in the officer's report. Assuming freehold title is granted to the city by the state government and the city subsequently passes this freehold title to a retirement village operator, how does the state subsequently cancel this arrangement and take back the land in the event the operator defaults for whatever reason?
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, so there's no proposal for the land to be simply freehold. The land is owned by the state government and the minister will have the final say on the type of land tenure granted. As previously stated, the proposed tenure is conditional freehold, which is a type of land tenure used to protect the state's interest and those of the residents. In addition, the title will have a memorial placed on it, which registers the interests of the residents in the land. Essentially, the land can only be used for retirement villages and for a retirement village and purposes ancillary to a retirement village.
My last question. Has the city considered what its commitment is in relation to the Collier Park Village Reserve? We assume the monies the city is currently liable to return to residents on departure will be handed over to a new operator to be held in accordance with the Retirement Villages Act 1992, Retirement Villages Regulation and Code. If so, does this mean the city will have to find additional funds to meet this commitment?
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
There's no requirement to fully cash back the residents' liability under the Retirement Villages Act. The city currently has 2 reserves. One is the Collier Park Reserve, which accumulates the lease premium and refurbishment levy paid by residents and pays for capital purchases, refurbishments, and accounts for the net operating result. The other reserve is the Resident Offset Reserve, which currently holds approximately 18.5 million and was established to cash back the liability payable to residents exiting the village. As per my previous statement, there's no requirement to fully cash back the residents' liability under the Retirement Villages Act 1992. The way the liability is handled will be addressed in the proposals put forward as part of the RFP process. Council will be made fully aware of how that will happen when the final transaction is put before them, if any is put before them. The city will not have to fund any additional amounts as part of that transaction.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, and thank you, Mr. Scott, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Ms. Bronwyn David of South Perth, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, administrative staff and public gallery. Bronwyn David, 46 Anstey Street, South Perth. Walking around the suburb with my dog, something's come to my attention. I came upon markings in the verge at 28 to 30 Forest Street, South Perth, near the corner of York Street. And it's a pre-primary school there run by St Columbus. My understanding that these markings on the ground indicate that car parking is going to be cut into the verge, and this car parking was required as a planning condition for the retrospective approval of a change of use from religious activity to educational establishment, kindergarten, and associated building works granted by the City on the 21st of May 2020. This change of use, building works and removal of on-site car parking bays has been undertaken without the required development approval. Hence, St Columba's were required to seek retrospective approval. My first question is, can the City please advise if the development application was approved by the City administration under delegation and without public advertising? And if so, why, when it involved a shortfall of car parking that it impacts on the amenity of the locality and will result in a large portion of the adjoining landscaped verge being bitumenised and converted to car parking, effectively privatising public land and reducing the amenity of the area?
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms David, for the question. Approval for a retrospective partial change of use from religious activity to educational establishment, kindergarten, was granted under delegated authority in May 2020. Neighbour consultation was undertaken on receipt of the initial development application and again following receipt of amended plans.
Thank you. My second question is, can the City please tell me what the approved car parking shortfall was and if cash in lieu was required to be paid for this shortfall?
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
A condition of the development approval required the applicant to pay for the construction of 4 embayed car parking bays within the verge area which addressed the shortfall. The condition requiring the payment did not use the term cash in lieu, and therefore the development application did not appear in the search for applications where a cash in lieu payment had been received when the register was initially established. As such, the register will now be updated and will include this development application.
Thank you, Mr Quigley. And just before your third question there, Ms David, I do note that we need to extend the time for public question time. I'm happy to move that motion. Councillor Brenda Abrandis has seconded. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridland, how would you like to vote on a motion to extend public question time?
I vote yes.
Thank you. I think we're 1 vote short. Even then. Councillor D'Souza, could you just assist Councillor Warland with... That's great. That was unanimous. Sorry for the interruption, Ms David. Please continue with your third question.
Thank you, Mayor. Can the City please advise how it will ensure that the 4 car parking bays will be installed and accommodated in the street verges and existing services relocated without impacting the health of the existing street trees and leaving space for more street trees? Because as we know, in the absence of owners of land being prepared to or required to conserve trees on private property to date, public space is under increased pressure to bear the burden of greater tree density to make up for the declining private canopy, lest the city become an urban heat island with the serious consequences that entails for human life and wildlife.
Thank you, Ms David. Mr Quigley?
The City is currently undertaking a detailed design to install 4 embayed parking bays on the verge adjacent to the site, 2 on each street. As part of the design process, engineering services will request the Parks and Environment Service review the plans to ensure there will be no impact on the existing street trees. Current markings on the verge are to identify the location of underground services only.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr Quigley, and thank you, Ms David, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr Ken Ashworth of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Ken Ashworth, 28 Leonora Street, Como. The city has a current liability to the Collier Park Reserve of just over $25 million. I understand that this money has been used to fund non-village related costs. If this money was still in the reserve and earned a conservative 2% interest, the resultant return would have been $460,000 per annum. My question to council is, has the city taken this potential income into account when calculating the operating loss that has been reported?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So I'm not sure where you got your information from, but the money that was in the Collier Park Offset Reserve has never been used to fund anything outside of village-related costs, other than what was put forward in the last budget, which I'll get to in a minute. The village operating losses are inclusive of all interest on reserves. So that reserve, as I said before, currently has $18.5 million in it. Without including the income from interest, which is applied back to reserve in any case, the reported losses would have been even higher.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And your next question, please, Mr Ashworth.
The Collier Park Village Reserve Fund can be used to fund the city's short-term liquidity requirements should the operational needs arise, as noted on page 17 of your 21-22 annual financial report. My question is, if these funds are transferred to a private operator of the village, will this lack of a method to fund the city's short-term liquidity requirements be an issue for the city's ongoing financial situation?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
Okay, I'll just reiterate, the Collier Park Village Residents Offset Reserve has only been used to fund the outgoing payments to residents. Last budget year, council agreed to borrowing some of the funds to finance underground power to be repaid back to the reserve at the WATC interest rate that the city would have had to borrow this at. This arrangement was deemed as being beneficial to the reserve. The short-term liquidity purpose was only established during the uncertain times of the pandemic, which is budget years 2021 and 21-22. So what you've read in the annual report is no longer the case, because in the current year budget papers, the purpose of using it for liquidity was removed. So as I said, the reserve money was not used to fund non-village related costs. Pursuant to a council resolution on 14th of December 2021, a detailed report was presented to the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee in March 2022, confirming that the village reserve funds have only been applied for village purposes. And as I stated, the short-term liquidity purpose has since been removed from the purpose of all city reserves, as there was ultimately and still is no need for the application of funds in this manner. So if you want to look at this year's current budget papers, you'll see that the statement about in the purpose of the reserves regarding using it for short-term liquidity purposes has been removed.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Mr Ashworth, for your questions. We're now going to take a moment to reconnect with Councillor Glenn Cridland. I've been advised that the connection's been lost, so bear with us, and we're just going to call Councillor Cridland again.
Hi, you've called Glenn. I'm on the phone at the moment. If you leave a message, I'll give you a call back. Thanks, bye.
Perhaps we'll give that one more shot, shall we?
Hello.
Hello, Councillor Cridland. Just re-establishing connection there. Can you hear me okay?
Certainly can.
Excellent.
Sorry for Telstra.
No problem at all. We're proceeding with the sixth asker of public questions. So with that, I'd like to invite Ms Cecilia Brook of South Perth. if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors and city staff. My question tonight is regarding the LPS 7 preamble. I note that the TPS 7, in the TPS 7, the land that the Manning Senior Citizen Centre and the Manning Men's Shed are on, or at 3 Downey Street, Manning, is zoned Public Assembly R20. In the proposed LPS 7, this land is being rezoned to residential R100. My question is, why is it deemed necessary to rezone this land when the buildings on it provide such important benefit to the community of South Perth?
Thank you, Ms Brooke. Mr Giddens.
Thank you, through the chair. Good evening, Ms Brooke. The site's identified by the local planning strategy as being up to R50. In advertising the draft LPS 7, an R100 coding was applied to provide a high development density for this site. As discussed in the report, there are no plans to remove or repurpose the Manning Senior Citizen Centre nor the Manning Men's Shed. The current land uses are to be retained. The existing tenants have certainty over this site through a recent 10-year lease agreement signed with parties to ensure the Senior Citizen Centre and Men's Shed can continue to provide important community services into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Giddens, and thank you, Ms Brooke, for your question. I'd now like to invite Ms Heidi Schmidt of South Perth, if you'd like to come to the microphone. I do note that you've got a very long preamble there. If we can keep that to 1/3 of that size, please.
I've reduced it already.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors and city staff. Heidi Schmidt, 31 York Street, South Perth. I have worked since December 2022 with the city to try and understand what's occurring on my street, which is childcare that has not had to go through planning approval whatsoever. I note that 58 children can attend the childcare business at the St Columbus Primary School site in the parish hall and a corner playground. The school never has 58 children in that particular site ever. I've had 3 responses from the city to condense the preamble. My first response was that planning approval was required, would be sought as soon as possible. That did not occur.
Okay, Ms Schmidt, I will ask you to go on to the questions now.
Okay.
It really is just for questions, not for public statements.
One part that's very important. So, under the local planning scheme, the definition of educational establishment is, quote, premises developed for the purpose of education and includes a school, college, university, etc., unquote. By contrast, the definition of a childcare centre is, quote, premises for the daily or occasional care of children in accordance with the regulations for childcare under the Child Care Services Act 2007, unquote. My question is, my understanding of planning law is that the land use definition in the local planning scheme, that is the best fit, must be applied. The Camp Australia business is registered as childcare use run by employees without educational qualifications and is fundamentally childcare, used for the daily or occasional care of children. It is not for the purpose of education. So, can the city please explain why the use has been incorrectly determined to be an educational use?
Thank you for the question. Mr Quigley.
Thank you, Ms Smith, for your question. The city considers that the correct interpretation has been applied and the use is ancillary to an educational establishment.
Thank you, Mr Quigley. Your second question, Ms Schmidt.
Second question, will the city reconsider its decision according to the best fit and request that Camp Australia submit a development application for the childcare use?
Thank you. Mr Quigley.
The city is not in receipt of any new information that would result in a reconsideration of its decision that the use is ancillary to the main use as an educational establishment.
Thank you, Mr Quigley. And your third question, Ms Schmidt?
The question, therefore, is how will the city address the detrimental impacts of the childcare use on the amenity of local residents? It's significant.
Thank you. Mr Quigley?
Any complaints received by the city will be dealt with in accordance with our policy P319, planning compliance.
Thank you, Mr Quigley, and thank you, Ms Schmidt, for your questions.
Yeah.
I'd now like to invite Ms Joanne Ord of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone. And we look forward to your questions.
Evening all. Joanne Ord, 94 Gardner Street, Como. So my questions pertain to the imminent RFP process at Collier Park Village. So the uncertainty that this imminent RFP and sale process has created for some of the residents at Collier Park cannot be overstated. Does the city plan to keep the residents informed of the progress being made during the negotiations by holding regular meetings at the village, such as that which occurred on the 20th of March?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So it's worth stating, I think, that the city has tried to be as open and transparent in its communications with residents about the proposed RFP process as it possibly can be. Residents were informed of the proposed RFP process on Thursday, 16th of March by the city, and were given a copy of the council report together with frequently asked questions and information about how to address council via a deputation or public questions. Another information session was held on the 20th of March with a specific focus providing information about the protection of residents' rights and the additional time for questions. The frequently asked questions were also published on the website. On Friday, 17th of March, all residents received an individually addressed and hand-signed letter from Mike Bradford, the CEO. City officers have made themselves available to answer any questions from residents, and a designated email address has been established for residents and their families. Earlier today, our CEO hosted an informal question and answer session for residents at the Collier Park Village Community Centre. The city has also scheduled a meeting with the Residents Committee for tomorrow to discuss the outcomes of tonight, and will continue to keep all residents updated. We've made a commitment to do that, and we'll continue to meet with them regularly. If we have further requests come in for us to go down there, either myself or the CEO will go down there with appropriate staff members to talk to them about their concerns.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And Ms Ord, before you ask your second question, I do note that we're going to need to extend public question time again. I'm happy to move a motion to that effect. Councillor Brenda Brand is seconding. Councillors, please cast your votes on whether we extend public question time again. And Councillor Cridland, how would you like to vote on that?
I'm a yes again.
Thank you. That was unanimous. Sorry to interrupt, Ms Ord. More than entitled to ask your second question now.
So question 2, at the village meeting on the 20th of March recently, the city indicated that the village has a current value of approximately 24 million on their books. The city admitted that the village has been making a loss since 2012, and that the village would need to be sold at and expected to be less than the value of 24 million. So what price is the city prepared to sell the village for, assuming that the other criteria for a successful RFP process are met?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
Whilst the village currently sits on the city's books at 24 million, the city does not expect to receive 24 million for the transfer of Collier Park Village to an operator. The city's not looking to sell the village as such. It's looking for proposals from the market that would see an improvement to how the village operates and results in significant improvements to the village, including its infrastructure and the amenities provided. All proposals will be considered in the context of the evaluation criteria, separate to any assessment of the price being offered. So one of the reasons we're going to the market in this way is so that we can get a range of proposals that address the criteria without being too prescriptive and prescribing a price or anything like that. So we're open to market proposals and we'll evaluate them accordingly and bring something back to council.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And Ms Ord, your third question?
Number 3, given the importance of retaining mature tree canopy, evident by the city's own push for increased protection of the existing tree canopy within LPS 7, it is of note there are no significant trees registered within the grounds of the Collier Village, as evidenced by the interim maps, and the gardens and the mature trees are a special feature of the village and are appreciated by its residents and the surrounding community. How does the city plan to protect the existing mature trees from removal by the new operator?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
So the city's included protection of the existing landscape as part of the vision statement that accompanies the draft evaluation framework. In addition, we recently commissioned an audit of trees above 5 metres on the Collier Park Village site, and we'll make that available to proponents. A landscaping plan for all proposed development stages is also proposed to form part of the contractual arrangements and will be made available to council in making any final decision to proceed.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Ms Ord, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Carolyn Burnett of Salter Point to the microphone. Welcome, Ms Burnett, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Carolyn Burnett of Salter Point. My preamble is very short. There were many concerns raised via feedback about the proposed LPS 7. Densities that are either will be too high, street parking and infrastructure, etc. I won't go on. My first question, it is of note that the City recommends ignoring the Department of Transport's own recommendations that the density increases in the Manning Road Urban Corridor growth area be delayed until a clear role for public transport in the relevant section of Manning Road can be confirmed. I also raised this in my own feedback to the Council, and no, I don't work and never have worked for the Department of Transport. I am simply a resident of the city and have been for over 20 years with a lived experience of the Manning Salter Point community. Why does the city choose to put the cart before the horse and make decisions ignoring the advice of the Department of Transport when the future of Manning Road in terms of its transport serviceability is undecided? Why are they ignoring the Department of Transport's own recommendation in pursuing the Manning Road Urban Corridor increased density?
Thank you for the question. Mr Gibbons, can I send that your way?
Thank you. Through the chair. Thanks for the question, Ms Burnett. The City has considered and responded to the comments raised in the submission received from the Department of Transport in its response to the scheme, and you can find that in attachment B of the schedule of submissions. The proposed density increases do not prejudice the future function of Manning Road and are actually within walking distance of existing bus routes on Leigh Street and Canavan Crescent.
Thank you, Mr Gibbons. And your second question, Ms Burnett?
Question 2. I refer to Table 1 and the summary of general issues raised, Table 1 in the agenda. It is of note that further in the agenda, these issues are addressed with reference to existing legislation, policies, or being in line with the strategy. Is the city telling its constituents that no matter their planning concern, it will be ignored because there is a strategy, a policy of word salad, or legislation that will be referred to as a default response, so there is no point in the community providing feedback?
Thank you for the question. Mr Gibbons?
Yes, thank you for the second part of your question, Ms Burnett. The local planning strategy is a key document in providing the broad rationale underpinning the land use zonings, densities and planning provisions and development controls in draft LPS 7, which were the subject of community engagement at the time. The draft LPS therefore must be consistent with the local planning strategy.
Thank you, Mr Gibbons, and thank you, Ms Burnett, for your questions. Now, I will check before we move on. Are there any late questions in the tray? No, there's not. Okay. Well, in that case, I close public question time at 6:52 p.m. We now move on to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held 28 February 2023. So I'm about to look for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 28 February 2023 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Russell, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Quidland, how would you like to vote on that?
I vote yes.
Thank you. So that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 7.2, which is notes of briefing. And I'll shortly call for a mover and a seconder that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops, and 7.2.2, council agenda briefing, 21 March 2023. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Navard, thank you. Seconded by Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Quidland, how would you like to vote on that one?
Yes again, please.
Thank you. And that was unanimous again. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions. And the City has received the following petition. Item 8.1.1, LPS 7, support to not rezone number 1 Waverley Street, South Perth, with 46 verified signatures. And this petition was received at the council agenda briefing held 21 March 2023 from Mr. Simon Stewart Dawkins of Waverley Street, South Perth. The petition has been considered by officers in item 10.3.1, draft local planning scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. We now move on to item 8.2, which is gifts or awards presented to council, nil this evening. And then item 8.3 is deputations. And deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held 21 March 2023. That brings us to item 9, the method of dealing with agenda business. And I wish to advise that the following agenda items are new reports and were not presented to the council agenda briefing held 21 March 2023. Those are item 15.1.1, Councillor Code of Conduct Matter 1, and item 15.1.2, Councillor Code of Conduct Matter 2. I now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the March Council agenda briefing. Mr. Bradford.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean the officer recommendation will be adopted as is, without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn. Item 10.3.1, draft local planning scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. The reason is that myself, Mayor Greg Milner, and councillors Nick Warland, Mary Choi and Ken Manolis have financial interests, and also because councillors Blake D'Souza, Stephen Russell and Andre Brenda Abrandis have amending motions. Also withdrawn is item 10.5.4, annual review of council delegations. And the reason for that is Councillor Stephen Russell has an amended motion and also because an absolute majority is required. Councillors, does anyone else wish to withdraw any other items for discussion this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to withdraw any other item, but I don't think you mentioned my particular interests in respect of 10.3.1.
Quite right, yes. So Councillor Cridland has also declared a financial interest, proximity interest and impartiality interest in relation to item 10.3.1. Thank you for the pickup, Councillor Cridland. So does anyone wish to pull anything out for this evening? That's a no. Okay. In that case, we will move on. I will now call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those items are item 10.1.1, Collier Park Village, item 10.1.2, proposed lease agreement for the Collins Street Centre Playgroup, Inc., located at the Collins Street Centre, Collins Street, South Perth. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments February 2023. Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, February 2023. Item 10.4.3, electors general meeting, I think that's meant to be 2022, 2023. Item 10.5.1, audit register progress report quarter 2. Item 10.5.2, risk management and business continuity activity report. Item 10.5.3, compliance audit return. And item 15.1.3, information systems audit external report. Could I have a mover, please, councillors? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, a seconder. Councillor Warland, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And how would you like to vote on those items by exception resolution, Councillor Quidland?
I vote yes.
Thank you. All right, so those items were just passed unanimously. For the benefit of those listening via audio, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, the first of which is item, and that brings us to item 10, item 10.3.1, draft local planning scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. And at this point, I need to advise that as my fellow councillors are aware, 8 councillors have declared financial and/or proximity interests in this item. That's not unusual when the relevant item is a local planning scheme, but the declaration of a financial or proximity interest would normally preclude an elected member from participating in or voting on the relevant item. In the past, or at least during my time as mayor, when 5 or more elected members have declared a financial or a proximity interest in an item, which would ordinarily leave this council without a quorum, the city has applied to the Department of Local Government for a ministerial exemption. During my time as mayor, those ministerial exemptions have previously been granted. They've allowed all affected elected members to participate in the debate and vote on the relevant item. But this time, only 4 exemptions have been granted, which is the minimum number required for the formation of a quorum of 5. So the department has granted approval for Councillor Cridland, Councillor Navard, Councillor Russell and Councillor Brenda Abrandis to participate in and vote on this item. Councillor Warland, Councillor Choi and I will need to leave the room and wait until this item has been resolved before returning to the chamber. Deputy Mayor D'Souza has not declared an interest in this item, so he is unaffected. I will now ask Deputy Mayor D'Souza to take my place as presiding member, and I will leave the chamber. But before I do, I would like to recognise, acknowledge and welcome our local MLA, Mr Jeff Baker, MLA. Welcome. Councillor D'Souza, would you like to take my place now as presiding member, and perhaps someone could come and retrieve Councillor Choi, Councillor Warland and myself once this item is concluded. I'll see you all soon.
So we are now on item 10.3.1, which is the draft local planning scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. Just some general housekeeping before I begin, because obviously there's a lot of interest in this item. The way I intend to deal with this is to first put the officer report and see if that has a mover and seconder, and then we will proceed to the various amendments which we have from myself, Councillor Brenda Abrandis and Councillor Russell. I'll be proceeding based on the first in time rule. So my amendments were first. I'll consider mine first. Then I believe Councillor Brenda Abrantes were next, and then Councillor Russell's. Is that your understanding, Councillor Russell? Do you? Okay, that is okay. Apologies. I'll consider Councillor Russell's amendments next, and then I'll consider Councillor Brenda Abrantes's. My intent was initially to put every single subclause of the amendments piece by piece. Can I get city advice whether or not that's a viable option?
Our advice is that you should put the numbers, the ones that are numbered, you can put them separately, but you should consider everything as a whole. So the individual parts form the whole of the recommendation, so they need to be put as a whole, unless somebody particularly wants to vote on one particular element separately, but I wouldn't go down the path of trying to vote on every single element separately. So if there's a particular need to pull out a particular part or subpart, then that's your call to do that, if somebody requests it.
So to clarify, put them all as a job lot, except if council's request for certain subclauses to be withdrawn, if they're against. Thank you. I'll now proceed to the item, which is the officer's report. So can I have a mover, please, for item 10.3.1, which is the, again, the draft LPS 7 consideration of submissions and recommendation. A mover, please. Councillor Navard and Councillor Cridland.
Yeah, I'm happy to either move it or second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Navard has moved that. Would you be happy to second that?
Certainly.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Navard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think there's a great deal of interest in the outcomes of the decisions tonight. I know that we have proposed amendments here as well. I would therefore support the officer's recommendation insofar as this needs to be now considered.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Cridland, anything further to add?
Only that this is something that we need to do, and we've spent a lot of time and effort on making it as good as we can, and then we've had a third party kind of change it again. So this is our opportunity to again try and get it right and send it off to the WAPC, where no doubt people with greater minds and more experience will come up with very different solutions for some of the things that we think are appropriate for our community. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. If there are no objections, I'll now proceed to the amending motions. None? Okay, so I'll proceed with my my amending motion. If I can just read that out now. Yep. So my amending motion is as follows. That the officer's recommendation be amended as follows. 1. Pursuant to Regulation 25(3) of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, supports draft Local Planning Scheme number 7 with proposed modifications to address issues raised in the submissions as set out in Attachment A, draft LPS number 7, schedule of text and map modifications, with the following amendments to the Manning Road Urban Corridor area. I. Modify the scheme map to recode all residential zone properties fronting Manning Road or otherwise from R60 to R40. 2. Modify the scheme map to recode all residential zone properties fronting and on the northern side of Danny Drive from R50 to R60. And 3. Modify SL1 of Lot 340, Lot 12, Lot 11 and Lot 342, which are numbers 49, 51, 51A and 53 Bickley Crescent, and SL2 off lot 340 and lot 10, which are numbers 17 and 19 Pether Road, Manning, to apply an R40 density code. 2, pursuant to Regulation 28 Sub 1 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, requests the CEO to forward draft LPS 7 to the WA Planning Commission with all relevant information required by the regulations. Can I have a seconder for the item?
Just before you do, Glenn Cridland's dropped out again, so we'll just hold, so we're just reconnecting him.
We'll just pause there because Councillor Cridland has lost connection.
In the meantime, may I ask a clarification regarding the way that we're going to treat these amending motions? So for clarity, is what we're suggesting is that we say the actual amending items as a job lot, and then we give the reasons as a job lot, and then we vote separately as required? As required by an elector, but at the discretion of the presiding member?
Mr. Adams?
Yeah, so each motion, each amending motion is to be considered separately, but the motion is what's on the page in total, including all the subparts. So it gets debated as one, and then if there is a need to vote on individual elements separately, then that is a call that the presiding member can make. So a member can ask the presiding member to vote on a particular element separately, but we're not going to go through the process of voting on each individual.
Glenn, I'm on the phone at the moment. If you leave a message, I'll give you a call back. Thanks.
So we're not going to go through the process of voting on each individual element separately. However, if there is a need and the presiding member agrees that there is a need, then an individual element can be voted on separately.
Hello again, South Perth.
Welcome back, Councillor Cridland. Sorry, Councillor Russell, does that satisfy your question? Thank you. So we were at, and for your benefit, Councillor Cridland, I had moved and read the text of my amending motion, and I was calling for a seconder. So do I have a seconder for my amending motion? Councillor Navard, thank you. I'll now proceed to my reasons, and then I'll go to Councillor Navard. Reasons for change. Amenity and community concerns. These amendments have been drafted based on significant community concern as to what an R60 coding along Manning Road would mean in practice. Salter Point resident Carolyn Burnett submitted a petition of 356 residents at the December 2020 Ordinary Council meeting raising these concerns. Further submissions were provided during public consultation, which reflect similar levels of concern with the scale of the proposed upcoding along the Manning Road urban corridor. 3, this amendment allows for the preservation of suburban streetscape and retention of much valued amenity for residents adjacent to the Manning Road urban corridor and along Manning's inner roads. Department of Transport advice. As part of stakeholder consultation, advice has been provided by the Department of Transport dated 6 December 2022, outlining its views on the City of South Perth LPS 7. This is noted on page 38 of the agenda and is contained within submission number 461 of attachment B, Schedule of Submissions. 2, this advice recommends explicitly that the City, quote, reconsider or delay for future possible scheme amendment the upzoning of development densities in the Manning Road urban corridor growth area until a clear role for public transport on the relevant section of Manning Road can be confirmed. 3, part of the planning rationale for the Manning Road urban corridor being identified as a growth area based on the Department of Planning's 2018 Central Sub-Region Planning Framework was being on a high-frequency bus route. As this is no longer the case, the planning rationale to significantly upcode along Manning Road is diminished. 4, the Public Transport Authority, having stated that such density increases would require additional or amended bus services to support development. The advice notes there are no current plans for this. 5, further, the southbound on-ramp to the Kwinana Freeway has increased traffic throughput along Manning Road. It is unclear how the road network would cope with the upcoding along Manning Road as currently proposed. 6, therefore, unless and until there are concrete plans to increase public transit along Manning Road, it is unwise to upcode such areas when the public transport network might not keep up with demand, thereby further exacerbating traffic and parking problems already existent in Manning. Councillor Cridland, can you still hear us? Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still in the land of the living and I can hear you. Thank you.
That's a relief. Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Those are my comments for now. I'll throw to Councillor Navard as seconder if she has anything to add.
Mr. Presiding Officer, no, that's fine. I just wanted the opportunity to have it raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Do we have anyone to speak against the proposed amendments? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Yes, with respect to your good self and your good intentions, in my opinion, this amendment is without reason. Manning Road is a major transport corridor within the city, and therefore, under the strategy, Manning Road is to have increased density along its length east of the Canning Bridge Activity Centre. What was advertised being R60, R30 split and R60, R50 split is reasonable and indeed should be compared to the proposed much higher density along Canning Highway, which, without argument, is a less functioning road than Manning Road. To this point, I wish to bring to Council's attention that when considering the strategy, it reduced density along Manning Road corridor, and therefore requesting further density reduction is not reasonable. Indeed, it is my opinion it is unfair on the other areas of South Perth where traffic levels of service are at risk. The argument that Transport WA does not have bus services should not be a reason for reduced density. Bus services will come when density increases. Again, this is to be compared to Canning Highway, where a significant capital investment is required to increase its functionality to meet the density increases in its catchment areas. There is a real risk that Canning Highway becomes less functional in the future if the necessary investment is not made. In fact, the Canning Highway upgrades is not on a 4-year budget. The minor cost of additional bus services is not even in the same ballpark as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Is there anyone to speak in favour of the amendment? Councillor Bender-Apprentice.
Some questions of the administration.
By all means.
Thank you. With regard to this proposal, I was just wondering if you could just advise whether the amendment has valid planning reasons that have been considered with regard to the proposed density reduction.
Mr. Giddens.
Thank you, through the chair. The reasons for the motion relate to the advice received from the Department of Transport and the concerns relating to a lack of public transport and additional traffic in the Manning Road growth area. Reasons relating to traffic and advice from key stakeholders is a valid consideration. However, the City has addressed these comments in the report, and I'll just outline what those are. Manning Road is identified for increased density by the local planning strategy, consistent with the sub-regional framework for Perth. The Manning Road is an urban transport corridor in proximity to the Canning Bridge train station and also Curtin University. Properties on the northern side of Manning Road are largely within a walkable catchment of the bus stops on Canavan Crescent. The City's planned Canning Bridge to Curtin bike link will also run through the northern side of the growth area and will service the area with a high-quality active transport route. In addition, the scheme provisions are proposed to rationalise the number of crossovers directly fronting onto Manning Road. The second point also is in relation to traffic. The traffic and congestion forecast that was undertaken by Flight Consultants as part of the Integrated Transport Plan identified that although there are some obvious congested locations in the city from time to time, none of those observed identified failure of the network to cope or to limit the strategic land use goals of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddens. Councillor Brendan Brandis, further questions? Thank you very much for that response, Ms. Giddens, and thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I do have a few more questions with regard to this proposal. We have heard from Councillor Russell that Canning Highway, of course, is heavily impacted by LPS 7 and obviously the increased density along that road. I'd just like to understand how we'd be able to compare the impact of rezoning on Canning Highway density to the proposed reduction in density for Downey Drive and Manning Road as part of LPS 7. Mr. Giddens.
Thank you very much, through the Chair. Canning Highway and Manning Road are both urban corridors and as such are identified to accommodate additional density in line with the state planning framework. Both roads have the servicing capacity to accommodate the increased density.
Councillor Brandra Brandis, thank you again for that response and thank you to the Chair. Would the WAPC consider this amendment as appropriate, or would there be likelihood that they'd seek to overturn these amendments? Mr. Giddens.
Yes, thank you, through the Chair again. The WAPC will want draft LPS 7 to align with the strategy and deliver on our dwelling targets. The WAPC will assess all the proposed amendments to the advertised version of draft LPS 7 on their individual planning merits.
Councillor Brenda Brandis, further questions? Thank you through the Chair and thank you for the response, Mr. Gibbons. The state government's commitment to the South Perth train station is broadly not supported at this date due to the population not making the service viable to deliver. With regards to the Department of Transport, would there be a requirement to increase the frequency of the public transport services or the number of routes offered if the demand increased in the locality due to the population increase? Mr. Giddens.
Yeah, thank you, through the Chair. The Public Transport Authority have advised that the proposed density increases to the Manning Road corridor and Welwyn Neighbourhood Centre would require the planning of additional or amended bus services to support development. Given the limited resources available, this may require future planning and changes to the existing bus network in the area. This indicates an ability to evaluate the network based on demand and future growth.
Councillor Brenda Brandis. That's all the questions you had? Thank you. Members, is there anyone else who wishes to speak for or against the item who already hasn't spoken?
Might I speak, Mr. Presiding Member?
Sure. The floor is yours, Councillor Quitland.
Thank you. I can certainly understand the people in Manning and Salter Point who are keen to reduce the increase in density in these areas. Indeed, I think probably most people impacted in the city by the increase in density would share their views. I found what Councillor Russell said to be persuasive, and I in no way criticise or suggest that the people of Salter Point and Manning who sought this reduction are doing anything other than trying to protect their local amenity as they see it. But that said, we have some unfortunate things we've got to do, and the state government have told us that we have to increase the density of our city by increasing the number of dwellings. And I fear, well, it's not I fear, I think it's almost certain that if these changes are made, they will simply be unmade by the WAPC, who has a wider field of view and perhaps doesn't see local amenity as well as the residents and the councillors do. That was my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Is there anyone who wishes to speak who already hasn't spoken on the item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. With regard to this amendment, it is a difficult one. I understand the community do want to actually retain a lower density, and that's not uncommon across the entire city. The mandate incumbent upon the city and other local governments is to increase density. We run the risk of not increasing density and sharing this load throughout the entire city, and the WAPC and the state coming back and actually increasing the density for us. We've seen this before where we've requested amendments and they've been overturned. This particular location is not as heavily or as significantly affected as the Canning Highway artery. It does have the upside with regard to the opportunity for the owners to actually realise properties to the best potential as well, which should be given some sort of consideration. I understand the issues with regard to the transport available, and that does raise a concern, although this may take some time. But again, as we've heard, from the officers, that with increased density, increased demand will also drive the increased services. This is actually a difficult one to identify as a separate carve-out as opposed to other parts of the city, because all across the city we're all in the same situation where we actually need to actually share the increased density as part of the directive from the state. And as such, I've given this motion quite a lot of consideration, and I find this a very difficult decision to make. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. I think everyone has spoken who wishes to speak. Before I do my closing and then put it to the vote, can I clarify from members if there's any specific sub-clauses they would like removed? None. Councillor Cridland?
No, none from me.
Thank you. In that case, I'll move to my closing remarks. Councillors, planning is one of those things where it really can be a bit of an art in terms of there are arguments based on sound planning rationale on both sides, and this is one of those debates tonight. I think the argument that states the WAPC will override us will always be the case, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't give it a red hot go. I think it's incumbent upon me as the Manning Ward councillor to try to move these amendments, because we might not get this chance again for potentially 20 years. The last town planning scheme, TPS 6, was gazetted almost 20 years ago to date, in 2003. So I would, I guess, want to know that I've done what I can to try to protect the suburban amenity of Manning and do the right thing by the people of Manning. I've put this motion forward based on two main grounds. The first being Ms. Carolyn Burnett's petition, and also the submissions which raise concerns with these upcodings, but also the Department of Transport advice. This is a state government agency stating that they have concerns with these upcoding proposals, and they would rather the City of South Perth defer consideration of these until public transport plans are clear. The advice also incidentally states the PTA don't have resources currently to fund bus routes in that area. So I think I have sound planning rationale, but as you've heard tonight, there is contest, there are points on both sides. In 2020, when we put these as the local planning strategy, I did move quite a few amendments then, and I'm pleased the WAPC has upheld the majority of them. But given, again, this is a once in 20-year chance for us to place provisions in our scheme which protect our suburbs for the future, it would be remiss of me not to at least give it a shot. So with that, I encourage councillors to support my amendments, and I will put them all to the vote now. Thank you, councillors. And Councillor Quidland, how do you wish to vote?
I'm a no, Mr. Presiding Member.
Thank you, Councillor. So we're still waiting on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Quidland. Yeah. So the result of the amendment is the amendment has failed. 1 vote to 4, and for the benefit of the public, those in favour were myself, and those opposed were Councillor Brender-Brandis, Councillor Navard, Councillor Russell, and Councillor Quidland. We now proceed to Councillor Russell's amending motion. If you'd like to read out the text, Councillor Russell, of your amending motion, and then we'll see about a seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. So, yes, that Council 1, pursuant to Regulation 25(3) of the Planning Development Regulations 2015, supports draft local planning scheme number 7 with proposed modifications to address issues raised in the submissions is set out in attachment A, draft LPS scheme number 7, schedule of text and map modifications with the following amendments. 1.1, delete scheme map modification number 7 in attachment A and replace scheme map modification number 6 in attachment A with the following wording. Modify number 90 McDonald Street with private community purpose zone to residential zone with a density code of R40. 2.2, modify the scheme map to recode all 100 coded lots bounded by Canning Highway, South Terrace, Felmer Street and McDonald Street, other than corner lots number 367 Canning Highway and number 245 to 247 Canning Highway to R80. 3.3, replace scheme map modification number 4 in attachment A with the following wording. Modify lots subject to ASR 13 requirements, Preston Street Neighbourhood Centre from RAC 0 to RAC 3. 4.4, replace scheme text modification number 6 in attachment A for the office and shop land uses with the following. A, land use office, minimum number of car parking bays from 1 to 50 square metres NLA to 1 to 50 square metres NLA for staff plus spaces for visitors equal to 10% of the number of staff-paid spaces for offices of 100 square metres NLA and greater. B, land use shop minimum number of car parking bays from 1 to 25 square metres NLA to 1 to 25 square metres NLA for visitors plus spaces for staff equal to 10% of the number of visitor spaces for shops of 100 square metres NLA and greater. C, land use shop minimum bicycle parking spaces from 1 to 500 square metres NLA for staff plus 1 to 200 square metres NLA for visitors to 1 to 200 square metres NLA for staff plus 1 to 25 square metres NLA for visitors. 5.5, under clause 38(1), home business home business F and home occupation G, the respective subclauses shall be modified as follows. Does not involve the presence, use or call-in of a commercial vehicle and then 6.6, under Schedule A, include an additional relevant deemed provision titled Part 3 Heritage Assessment Clause 11A Protection Against Demolition with the following provision. 1, demolition to a heritage listed place shall not be permitted. I will retract point 7 and replace it with this one, which now is modify scheme text modification number 10 in attachment A to include Murray Street in clauses 1 and 2. Point 2, pursuant to Regulation 28(1) of the Planning Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, request the CEO to forward draft Local Planning Scheme number 7 to the West Australian Planning Commission with all relevant information required by regulations. 3, request the CEO, in addition to point 2, include within its submission to the WAPC the Integrated Transport Plan, inclusive of the supporting traffic consultants report. And 4, request the CEO to, in addition to point 2, include within its submission to the WAPC a separate note or submission with that reference to the advertised LPS 7, recommended that prior to any density increase along Canning Highway and the Preston Street Neighbourhood Centre, that a TIA, transport study or a traffic assessment be undertaken to determine the impact and therefore by reason possible mitigations on the MRWA road and movement network. The City has an integrated transport plan to which the City provided to the MRWA in May 2021 as part of the consultation process. The City has not provided the ITP to MRWA as part of the draft LPS 7 advertising, nor consideration periods. The ITP is included within its documentation to the WAPC. In order for WAPC to assist in its consideration of LPS 7 and to assure itself that Main Roads WA as an SME are satisfied that the intent of their letter is met, the City recommends that the WAPC request MRWA to peer review the ITP and to provide advice as it sees necessary to the WAPC.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Before I call for a seconder, can I just clarify if the City understood the subclause 7 deletion Councillor Russell was talking about? Yep, okay, thank you.
That's correct, yeah, so that's being replaced by 8 as 7 now.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Can I have a seconder for the item? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillor Russell, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member, and thank you, Mrs. Navard. Okay, so as a preamble, the City scheme should be looked at more. Sorry, can we?
Please continue, Councillor Russell.
Again?
Yes, if you wish to.
Okay, thank you. So, as a preamble, the City scheme should be looked at more than a subdivision plan, but also a mechanism to benefit the community's amenity value in terms of road traffic, levels of service, heritage, typology, parking and commercial vehicle use within residential areas. Hence, with this in mind, the reasons for change are as follows. 1. For item 1.1, the properties identified were all upcoded as a result of a single request from the owners of a single property. In its support, the City cited improved density transitions and improved streetscape. With respect to the City, this is not considered a valid reason as the southern end of McDonald Street, that is south of Coma, is predominantly R40 with bookends of higher coding, and therefore the proposed upcoding is inconsistent with the advertised LPS 7 transition and streetscape vision. 2. For item 1.2, the City has advised that if the said Canning Highway R100 properties were recoded to R80, then this would incur approximate 55 dwelling loss. This is to be compared to a 300 dwelling oversupply for the City's Perth and Peel 3.5 million target. In return, the community would see a consistency along Canning Highway where properties with an SEA1 restriction are all R80. It is a reasonable argument that this provides the benefit of A, reduced traffic flow at property crossovers, particularly right into property manoeuvres, and therefore a better level of service on Canning Highway, and B, reduced use of local road network as RAT runs, in particular McDonald Street. Now and when Canning Highway is widened, when right turn in and out of manoeuvres are restricted. 3. For item 1.3, it should be noted that the Preston Street Centre is deemed a neighbourhood centre where under the R codes, RAC4, primary controls with respect to height and plot ratio are 3 stories and 1.2 respectively. It is understandable that perhaps RAC4 in terms of building height and mass is not consistent with the strategy. However, noting the concerns of the community with respect to the overdevelopment of Preston Street Centre, particularly at the higher elevation end of the street, then it was reasonable to advertise to the community the centre as RAC3, where noted. As the R code's primary controls are used in combination, then notwithstanding ASR 13, having specific height controls by not having a plot ratio, then ASR 13 is inconsistent with the R codes. It should be noted that the R code states, primary controls manage the form and scale of new development appropriate to the context and the existing or planned character of an area. As such, without a plot ratio, the resulting development on the ASR 13 sites with an associated RAC0 may deliver a development not in keeping with the intent of the R codes in terms of building mass and by extension the community's expectations. Reverting to the advertised RAC3 mitigates this risk. It should be noted that only one submission, number 431, specifically objected to RAC3 replacing RAC0. All other submissions relevant to RAC3 either objected to or supported RAC3. 4. For item 1.4, proposes minor modifications to office and shop minimum car bays to ensure that for sizable properties of 100 square metres in LA or greater that staff, shop and visitors office parking is provided and therefore not cannibalising parking suited to the primary purpose of the land use. In addition, it is the opinion that in agreement with the city's integrated transport plan, that cycling as a transport mode should be encouraged. This can only result if sufficient end of trip facilities are provided and therefore as shops would be a key destination for bicycle use, then it's proposed to revert to the shop minimum bicycle parking spaces to the advertised LPS 7 number, thereby providing greater numbers of 5. For item 1.5, the use of commercial vehicles that is greater than 4.5 tonnes gross vehicle mass for home businesses or home occupations will result in an amenity loss to residents who will be living within a future inner city-like environment. Hence, amenity losses such as elevated noise of larger vehicles, longer vehicles occupying more on-street parking bays, the manoeuvring of these vehicles on streets will all be realised. In addition, as the majority of existing vehicles will objectively be in compliance with the Motor Vehicle Standards Act 1989, then the GVM, or the gross vehicle mass, and not the tear weight, will be stamped on the compliance plate and therefore making on-site compliance checks for commercial vehicles to be non-disputable. 6. For item 1.6, city heritage listed properties are invaluable to the character and history of the city. Their loss as a result of demolition would be seen as an intergenerational inequality. To this effect, it is proposed to strengthen their protection from demolition by inclusion within the scheme, and therefore any demolition would first require...
Sorry, Councillor Russell, that's 5 minutes. I'm happy to move that you be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. If I can have a seconder for that. Councillor Brenda Brandis. Members, please cast your votes. Sorry, Councillor Cridland, how do you wish to vote?
No.
Majority anyway.
So, Councillor Cridland, how do you wish to vote to grant Councillor Russell an extra 5 minutes to speak?
Can you hear us?
I certainly can.
So, Councillor Cridland, how do you wish to vote to grant Councillor Russell a further 5 minutes speaking time?
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. That is passed unanimously. Councillor Russell, please continue.
May I ask if Councillor Cridland missed anything?
Councillor Cridland, did you hear Councillor Russell's reasons?
Sorry, there's a bit of echo. It's a bit hard to understand that.
Councillor Russell is asking through me that if that whether or not you've heard what he was saying.
I have seen his motion, and he was towards the end of his reasons when I dropped out.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Quinlan. Councillor Russell, please continue.
Thank you. Actually, I don't even know where I ended. I did 6? Okay, thank you. Okay, so 8. For item 1.7, the inclusion of Murray Street is to provide the same level of topology to that provided for Filmer and Morrison if Penrose so decides to develop their sport. For items 3 and 4, it is noted that MRWA, as a subject matter expert, has provided recommendations that the city undertake certain traffic or transport assessments to support increased density development along Canning Highway and the Preston Street Neighbourhood Centre. The city has the integrated transport plan, which may satisfy the recommendation of the MRWA. Notwithstanding that the city has previously submitted the ITP to the MRWA in 2021, it is still considered prudent that this document via the WAPC be peer reviewed by the MRWA and any findings be considered by the WAPC in its further considerations of LPS 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Russell. Councillor Nevada, seconder, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. No, I think Councillor Russell has done a very comprehensive explanation of his intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nevada. Does anyone wish to speak against Councillor Russell's motion? Councillor Brender-Brandis, questions? Yeah, by all means.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Thank you for the very detailed amendment. I just have a couple of questions, I think. Firstly, with regard to rezoning Canning Highway properties. So, of course, it was indicated from R100 down to R80. Part of the reasoning as well also considers properties with a SCA 1 restriction. Part of the rationale also is with regard to properties with crossovers, reduced traffic flow, and also the right into property manoeuvres, so better servicing from the Canning Highway. Is the administration quite comfortable that that's quite reasonable and that'll actually achieve some of those desired outcomes with reducing that density?
Mr. Giddens or Ms. Burbeck?
So reducing the density would achieve the outcomes of reducing the traffic flow in that area. So then it would have that effect of reducing, vehicles to and from those sites. So the reasons that were listed by Councillor Russell, we feel are correct.
Councillor Brender-Brandis?
Great, thank you very much for that response. The heritage has also been noted with regard to this item, and that is quite important because there are, whilst it's a very busy road and difficult road to manoeuvre on and off, there are some heritage properties which would be of good value. So just with regard to the heritage component, I can see that obviously this might actually achieve some of the outcome with not increasing that density. So does the administration have a view on that, and also a view with regard to future potential city heritage provisions that might be coming on board?
Ms. Burbeck?
Yep, so we're fully supportive of the this part of the motion that's being proposed. I guess it's at the moment the city has those provisions in TPS 6, essentially has the effect of carrying that over into LPS 7. The city doesn't recommend any further additions with regard to heritage provisions to the scheme.
Councillor Brender-Brandis? That's all, thank you. Members, is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against the item who hasn't already spoken? I will make some very... I'm sorry, Councillor Brender-Brandis?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I am speaking in favour of this amendment. It has been very well thought out and very detailed, taking into consideration some of those really dense traffic congested locations along the Canning Highway. It also does take into account parking and the requirements that we actually need to consider with regard to the impact of parking on those streets. I do support this. There is obviously nothing of concern that raises me with regard to reduction in density and also from what the officers have actually noted tonight. So I do support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brender-Brandis. Does anyone else wish to speak who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Cridland, do you wish to make any comments on this item?
Councillor Cridland, do you have any comments on this item?
Now, if I can just check, we're voting for this matter en bloc, is that right?
At this stage, that is correct. But if you have any comments or questions.
The only item that I would be concerned about is item Roman 5 in respect of the deletion of the vehicle of more than 5.5 tonnes tear weight. I have heard what Councillor Russell said in respect of the definition and how you can tell the weight of a commercial vehicle. However, it seems to me to have some utility to at least indicate that it's a commercial vehicle of some size that is banned, rather than any commercial vehicle which may be quite a small, for example, electric vehicle. So Roman 5 is the only one that I would speak against and am concerned by.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Yes, if Ms. Bibbett can clarify Councillor Cridland's concerns.
So what's being proposed by Councillor Russell is to delete that section of the definition that refers to the 4.5 tonnes tear weight. But what it does is just revert to the definition of commercial vehicle in the scheme. So the definition in the scheme, it does include a gross vehicle mass of greater than 4.5. So it would just essentially revert it to the definition of a tear weight to a gross vehicle mass. So it achieves the same outcome essentially, just using a different metric.
Thank you, Ms. Birbeck. Councillor Cridland, does that allay your concerns, the fact that it reverts to the scheme definition?
I can't say it does because I'm sorry, I just could not understand that. The sound quality was not good enough for me to understand the answer. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I can get Ms. Birbeck to repeat that if that's okay. Yeah, and we'll pass the phone down, so hopefully the sound quality improves.
So what I was saying was, so the motion proposes to remove the part of the definition that mentions the 4.5 tonnes tear weight. What it then does is still mentions the wording commercial vehicle, and that's defined in the scheme, and that's defined as being a vehicle that has a gross vehicle mass of greater than 4.5. So essentially it achieves the same outcome. We're just using gross vehicle mass instead of tear weight. That's the effect of the motion.
Thank you very much. That explanation deals with my concern and you were very clear there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Birbeck, for that explanation. So, Councillor Cridland, can I confirm then that you still wish to withdraw? Do you still wish to withdraw clause V, subclause V, or are you happy to leave it in?
I'm happy for it to be left in now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cridland. I might make some very brief comments. I have no concerns with these amendments. I will be supporting all of them, so I have nothing I wish to withdraw. I think Councillor Russell has put together a well-considered amendment, and I'll be supporting it. Before I invite Councillor Russell to sum up, are there any final questions or comments from those who haven't spoken? None? Okay. Councillor Russell, please, if you wish to close your item.
There's no closing comments, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell, and you're okay for me to put them all as one?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillors, please cast your votes on Councillor Russell's amending motion. And Councillor Cridland, how do you wish to vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland, and thank you, councillors. That amending motion is passed unanimously. And that amending motion now forms the substantive motion, which is the officer recommendation on the LPS 7 as amended by Councillor Russell's amending motion. We'll now proceed to our final amendment of the evening, which is Councillor Brander-Abrandis's amending motion. Councillor Brander-Abrandis, do you wish to move your motion? Please do.
Okay, thank you. This is an amendment to item 10.3.1, draft local planning scheme number 7, consideration of submissions and recommendation. Two amendments I have included in this motion tonight. The first being a tree amendment provision, and the second being to lot 3685, number 3, Downey Drive, Manning. What I'll be moving tonight is that the officer's recommendation be amended as follows. Pursuant to regulations 25 sub 3 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme, regulations 2015, supports the draft local planning scheme number 7 with proposed modifications to address issues raised in the submissions as set out in attachment A, draft local planning scheme number 7, schedule of text and map modifications with the following amendments. Schedule A, Part 7, 60, capital A, sub 1, sub A, by removing the tree achieves a maximum height of 8 metres from the natural ground level, and replacing it with Schedule A, Part 7, 60, capital A, sub 1, sub A. The tree achieves a maximum height of 8 metres from natural ground level and a minimum canopy width of 6 metres. And modify the scheme map to recode the entirety of lot 3685, number 3, Downey Drive, Manning, from R100 to Civic and Community. 2, pursuant to Regulation 28, sub 1 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes, Regulations 2015, requires the Chief Executive Officer to forward the draft Local Planning Scheme number 7 to the West Australian Planning Commission with the relevant information required by regulations. The reasons for the amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Brander-Abrandis, if I can have a seconder for the motion, Councillor Russell. Thank you, Councillor Brander-Abrandis. Yes, sorry, Councillor Russell.
Just a clarification, because I think Brander said the tree achieves a maximum height of 8 metres. That's not what that's not what's in the LPS. The LPS says the tree achieves a minimum height of 8. I think you just misspoke. Right.
Yeah, apologies. It is a minimum height of 8 metres above natural ground level and a minimum canopy width of 6 metres. Or a minimum canopy width of 6 metres.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brander-Abrandis, and thank you, Councillor Russell, for the clarification. Can I have a seconder for the item? Councillor Navard. Councillor Brander-Abrandis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Reasons for the amendment are as follows. The addition of the canopy dimension is to bring the tree size measurements more into line with the state planning policy residential design codes. The tree canopy ensures the additional criteria to consider when protecting trees on private land. Trees are vital to the ongoing livability of our suburbs, but are not being retained on private land. In 2020, the City of South Perth's canopy cover was approximately 17%. Private lots comprised of approximately 57% of the city's land. Despite this, substantial trees are not being retained by the community on private lots, providing only 13% of canopy cover for trees above 3 metres in height, and providing only 6% of canopy cover for trees more than 8 metres in height. They contribute 13% to the city's canopy coverage. Large trees on private lots that are greater than 8 metres in height only account for 6% of the city's total canopy coverage. As the city continues to grow, there will be considerable pressure on these trees. Without adequate protections in place, the city's total canopy coverage will likely fall. One of the proposed aims of the scheme is to protect and enhance the natural environment by maintaining biodiversity, protecting and increasing tree canopy, and reducing heat island effects. The tree protection provisions assist with the retention of vegetation, of significant mature and native vegetation within a development site, ensuring adequate tree canopy and deep soil areas. Fauna values need immediate consideration, given the time for mature fruiting trees to provide adequate food sources for the endemic black cockatoos. 3 species use the Swan Coastal Plains for foraging and breeding habitat throughout the year. The city has one of the largest roosting sites south of the river, located at the Collie Park Golf Course, Bentley Pines. Substantial trees are required for the roosting of large black cockatoos or for future potential breeding sites. Community feedback received has been highly supportive of the tree protection provisions. Reasons for amending Lot 3685, number 3, Downey Drive, Manning. This is currently occupied by the Manning Senior Citizens Centre site, and it also includes the Manning Men's Shed, from a proposed R100 zone to a civic and community are as follows. Residential zoning for a location that is being used by the Manning Senior Citizen Centre, including the men's shed in Manning, is inappropriate given the current use and benefit for members of the community. Both the Manning Senior Citizen Centre and the Manning men's shed offer the community essential services, along with the increased socialisation among senior citizens, promoting increased physical and mental health, which can result in longer life expectancy and reduce the risk of cognitive decline. These Manning community groups play an important part in the city, integrating and engaging, and should be preserved in perpetuity through ensuring the zoning is appropriate and it's not amended to residential R100. Rezoning this as R100 residential is not aligned for residential purposes compared to the current use and the expectation of patrons. There is currently no intention for this site to be residential with an increased zoning or as a surplus asset for potential disposal. Retaining the land with a civic and community reserve zoning ensures the city retains the land with the ability to use it for worthwhile community services and also ensures this land is retained for a future use as a reserve. The current use of the land sits more appropriately with a civic and community reserve objectives. This motion will make the zoning consistent and more aligned with the current land use. The Civic and Community Reserve provides objectives to provide for a range of community facilities which are compatible with surrounding development, and to provide for public facilities such as halls, theatres, art galleries, educational, health, and social care facilities, accommodating for the aged and other services by organisations involved in activities for community benefit. These are my reasons for the 2 amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brandis. Councillor Navard, as seconder, do you wish to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. No, I don't have anything in addition to add because I think that's really comprehensive. But what I would like to do is ask a question. And it relates to the Councillor Brandis's tree amendment provision. I know that community members have expressed their concern for the conservation of existing in-ground mature trees, including trees above 8 metres in height in the city of South Perth. Would the city please clarify for elected members and the community the steps the city will still need to undertake in order to have in place an urban forest policy that can include additional information relating to existing in-ground mature trees and which will subsequently operate as a guideline on decision-making regarding mature trees in the city of South Perth?
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Mr Giddens.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Navard. The city has recommended to council that new provisions are inserted into draft LPS 7 to require development approval to remove a tree over 8 metres in height. This is attachment F, the draft tree preservation local planning policy, and it demonstrates how the scheme provisions will operate within the planning framework and provide supplementary requirements. It is just a draft and has no bearing at this point in time. It is attached at this stage for information purposes only, and also to demonstrate to the WAPC that we have thought this matter out and we have actually delved a little bit deeper into it than some of our other local authority areas as well. The policy does, however, require further development and testing, and would also be subject to community consultation should the provisions for tree retention within draft LPS 7 be included in the gazetted version of that draft scheme. As part of this process, feedback from the community and the community groups will be undertaken on the proposed supplementary policy provisions and to value add to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddens, and thank you, Councillor Navard. Members, is there anyone who wishes to speak against Councillor Brandis's amended motion?
Now, Mr. Presiding Member, I actually, before I'd like to speak one way or the other,
Sure.
I just had a question, please. It's probably to Mr. Giddens, and it's in respect of paragraph B of Councillor Brenda Brandis's amendment.
Yep, far away.
All right. I've received some communication from the Mannings men's shed, and they have expressed concern to me that the proposed recoding of number 3 Downey Drive to R100 is a precursor or something that the city might do before evicting the Manning Senior Citizens Centre and the Manning men's shed. And I think there was that was raised in the questions earlier tonight from the public. Now, it's been suggested to me that effectively we, that is the Manning men's shed, would lose our shed to a block of units if this goes through. So there is some fear out there that I'm picking up. My question to Mr. Giddens is there a real basis to that fear? Does the city have any plans to evict the senior citizens at Manning or the Manning men's shed or sell off number 3 Downey Drive? And if some of the city did have that as a plan that I'm not aware of, would a decision like that have to come to council? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Quidland. Mr. Quigley?
Thank you for the question. The city has no intent to cause any disruption to the Manning Senior Cits Centre or the Manning Men's Shed. In fact, they provide a essential and valuable community service, which is evidenced by the recent long-term tenure that was offered between the city and the association. So council would be familiar that a report was presented to council to recommend a 10-year lease agreement between the city and the association. So that's quite a new agreement. And as I said, it's in our best interest to have a functional senior citizen centre in the community because they provide an essential service, and ultimately if that service was not provided by a third party like the association, then it would come back to the city to provide those services. So we certainly don't have any intention to break that strong relationship that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley, and thank you, Councillor
That answers my question.
Thank you, Councillor Quidland. Does anyone wish to speak against the item? Councillor Quidland?
Mr. Presiding Member, I would like to separate A and B simply because I would speak for B and I would speak against A.
Okay, Mr. Bradford, is that okay? We can do that. Thank you, Councillor Quidland. So, would you wish to speak now on?
I'm happy to do it very quickly and briefly now.
Sorry, Councillor Quidland. I believe you've already spoken, so I can't allow you a second go. So I apologise for that. Moving on, I might make a few points on this motion. I'm glad Councillor Brenda Abrandis has brought this motion because I submitted a similar motion as regards to the Manning Senior City Centre, and I had a conversation with Councillor Brenda Abrandis, and I subsequently retracted my motion because I believe Councillor Brenda Abrandis' motion offers stronger protection under the scheme for the senior cid site. My motion was going to lower the coding from R100 to R20, but going from R20 to leaving it as a civic and community reserve seemed a better option. It seemed to offer more certainty to the Manning Senior Sits and the Manning Men's Shed. And while I can't say I'm a senior citizen quite yet, I have been there numerous times, and it offers a fantastic service to our seniors, and really anyone who wants to go down there, I'd encourage you to do so. But it's important we maintain that certainty for them. I think it is a site, as far as any pieces of land in the city go, it's a site worthy of special planning protection. So I would be very, very supportive of that, and I encourage councillors to also support that. Thank you, councillors. Does anyone wish to speak on the item who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Russell, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Look, I'll be speaking for both items, but I wish to speak in particular with item 1A regarding the trees, because this is actually very important. So, look, firstly, I believe that that council and the community need to give the city officers due credit for responding to the substantial submissions given under LPS 7 advertising period. Absolutely. For me, the city's proposed provision for development application for the purpose of tree retention is similar to that for heritage preservation. Again, both address the needs for intergenerational equality. I keep going on about this, but which is one of the responsibilities of council. And therefore, I cannot see how a council would not allow such a scheme provision. With respect to the amending motion at hand, I can see that Councillor Brenda Abrandis has aligned the LPS 7 tree retention provision with the R codes by including the canopy dimension. Personally, I believe the R code should include a tree circumference for medium and large trees, as this is an easy method of measurement. But notwithstanding, the R codes for apartments does state that an elemental objective is, quote, adequate measures are taken to improve tree canopy or to offset reduction of tree canopy from pre-development conditions, close quote. For me, the former elemental objective, being to improve tree canopy, is the better and more genuine objective for so many reasons, and we've heard all those reasons. With respect to the latter elemental objective, being offsets from pre-development conditions, is utterly useless and indeed disingenuous when a site has been clear-felled before a building development application submission. The city's tree scheme provision directly marries both elemental outcomes and thereby, ironically, bringing into play the full elemental objectives of the R code in this respect. I therefore ask Mr. Caddy and indeed Minister Saffioti to fully reflect on this, in that this provision reflects the intent of the R codes when considering the city's LPS 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Members, does anyone who wish to speak who hasn't already spoken or wish to ask any further questions before I invite Councillor Brenda Abrandis to sum up? None? Okay, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, please close your case.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Are we taking these one at a time? Will I?
Yep. So you make your closing remarks, and then after we've closed the debate, I'll put them one at a time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member, for clarifying. Okay. The community feedback received with regard to tree protection provisions has been overwhelming. Trees are essential to the urban infrastructure and vital to our ongoing livability of our suburbs. We spoke about their environmental impact, social and economic benefits, improving air quality, reducing urban heat, improving public health and well-being, ecological links and habitat. The City of South Perth's 2020 canopy cover was approximately 17%, in Salt Point, Manning and Waterford having the lowest tree canopy cover. State Planning Policy 7.3 residential design codes have a deferred gazettal date with implementation from 1 September 2023, but will become operational for medium and high density lots, defining significant existing trees to have criteria including the height of at least 4 metres and or a trunk diameter of 160 millimetres and or an average canopy cover diameter of at least 4 metres. This motion aligns our tree protection provisions closer to where the state is actually heading. The challenge for the city and the state is to protect habitat and biodiversity, and specifically for the threatened red-tailed cockatoos, the endangered Carnaby's cockatoos, and the critically endangered Borden's cockatoos. I'm extremely concerned about the policy not having any significant native trees in the region, and that's something that we'll look at when we actually look through the policy at a later point in date. But with regard to this part of the motion, I implore my fellow councillors to support tree protection provisions to ensure the retention of larger trees on private land, which currently makes up about 85% of Perth's urban tree canopy, and to maintain the city's urban forest canopy. It is essential to protect the tree canopy on private property. With regard to my second amendment, retaining the land with a civic and community reserve zoning ensures the city retains the land with the ability to use it for worthwhile community services, and also ensures the land is retained for a future use as a reserve. This is better aligned for the current uses that it is actually being undertaken for. Categorisation as a reserve, civic and community ensures a high level of certainty and protection of the ongoing community use of this land. Civic and community categorisation removes the possibility that this land could be permitted under the discretion of granting approval for residential building and further developments. If lot 3685, number 3 Downey Drive, Manning, was categorised as civic and community, and there was any future intention to dispose of this property or a multiple dwelling, the local planning scheme would first require amendment. This provides greater certainty to long-term use and benefit of the current occupants providing community services. Thank you very much. That concludes my reasoning.
Thank you, Councillor Brandt-Brandis. So just to clarify how we're going to take the vote on this, the advice I've received is we're going to split it up into 3 votes. The first vote will be on clause 1A, which is the tree provision. The second vote will be on clause 1B, which is the Manning Senior SITS provision. And the third vote will be on clause 2, which is the procedural clause empowering the CEO to forward the IPS 7 and accompanying documents to the WA Planning Commission. So I'll now proceed. Sorry, is that understood? So I'll put 1A, then 1B, then 2. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, I'm sorry, why is point 2 a separate motion?
Separating one into A and B, so then you have to do 2.
Sorry, Miss, could you please just explain that?
Because there's been a request for item 1 to be separated into A and B. So you have to do 2 parts of question 1, or part 1, and then you've got part 2, so it needs a separate vote. Okay.
Thank you, Ms Tucker. Councillor Cridland, is that clear, the method of votes?
It is, and indeed, you're going to hate me more than you do already. I'm I withdraw my request for them to be dealt with separately if no one else wants it dealt with separately.
That's actually quite good, Councillor Cridlin, because it means we can consider all this as one vote. So appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Cridland. So without further ado, I'll put the item to the vote. That is clause 1A, 1B and 2, all as one vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridlin, how do you wish to vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cridlin, and that is passed unanimously. So now, just to update everyone, we are still on the LPS 7 item, which is 10.3.1. The substantive has been amended by Councillor Russell's motion, and it's been further amended by Councillor Brander-Abrandis's motion. So that now forms part of the substantive motion of the LPS 7, item 10.3.1. Yes, Councillor Russell. No, that's fine. I was just summarising where we're at, and now I guess that's what's the item in front of us. Councillor Russell.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I'd like to suspend Standing Order 8.9 speaking twice because actually I have another amendment I wish to bring forward.
Don't have to suspend standing orders if he wants to move another amendment.
You could just move the other amendment, Councillor Russell. You don't require to suspend standing orders. So if you'd like to move it, and then we'll see about a second.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Presiding Member. That that the officer's recommendation be be amended as follows. That pursuant to Regulation 25.3 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme, Regulations 2015 supports draft Local Planning Scheme number 7. With proposed modifications to address issues raised in the submissions as set out in Attachment A, Draft Local Planning Scheme number 7, Schedule of Text and map modifications with the following amendments. Okay, so the amendment is delete modification number 10 of the scheme map modifications within Attachment A and modify to number 1 Waverley Street, South Perth as residential R40. 2, pursuant to Regulation 28.1 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulation 2015, request the CEO to forward draft Local Planning Scheme number 7 to the WAPC with all relevant information required by regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I might just go to Mr. Bradford because he has some advice to provide.
Councillor Russell, does that reflect the amendment that Councillor Choi put forward?
No, it doesn't, because it brings it. This is our residential R40.
So it's different.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, I believe Councillor Choi's was to R15, mine's to R40.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Russell's new amending motion? Councillor Brander-Abrandis, thank you. Councillor Russell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. Yeah, so the primary concern of the neighbourhood is in relation to the commercial aspect of the potential development of number 1 Waverley and therefore the retention of residential in my amendment. A transition of R40, which is 2 stories under the current and future SPP 7.2-1R codes, to R15 is considered reasonable and typical throughout LPS 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Brander-Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Members, anyone to speak against Councillor Russell's motion? Or questions? Councillor Cridland?
My question is, can Councillor Russell just read that out again so I can try and grasp it?
By all means, Councillor Russell, if you'd like to repeat that.
Which part? The reason, or
sorry, Councillor Cridland, the motion or the motion, Councillor Russell.
The full motion or just the amended part?
Just the part which you're amending, yes.
Okay, thank you. So it's to delete modification number 10 of the scheme map modifications within Attachment A and modify to number 1 Waverley Street, South Perth as residential R40.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Members, any comments or questions on Councillor Russell's motion? Anything further, Councillor Cridland?
No, thank you for asking.
Thank you. Seeing none, I will invite Councillor Russell to sum up.
Nothing more to add, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll put the item to the vote. Members, please cast your votes. Councillor Cridlin, how do you wish to vote?
I'm a no.
That's noted. Thank you, Councillor Cridland. The amendment passes 4 votes to 1. And if we can get that up on the screen. So those in favour are myself, Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Russell and Councillor Navard. And those opposed are Councillor Cridland. Thank you, members. Now we proceed again to the substantive item 10.3.1, which is the LPS 7 and submissions, which has been amended now by Councillor Russell's first motion, Councillor Brenda Brandis's motion, and then Councillor Russell's most recent amending motion. That is the item now in front of us. Does anyone wish to speak or raise questions on the substantive as amended by those 3 motions?
Not from me.
No, thank you, Councillor Cridland. I'll make some very, very brief remarks. This has been many years in the making if we go back to the local planning strategy. And I want to sort of convey my thanks to the planning staff and the city as a whole, because this is a large piece of work. And as I'm sure everyone's heard tonight, there are it can be contentious. There are good points on both sides, but I think planning is one of the things which brings out the discussion and the debate of ideas, which by the depth of motions you've seen tonight, I think reflects that. So I just want to say this has been a long time coming, and I think this puts the city on the right track towards providing some sort of planning certainty to protect our suburbs into the future. Does anyone else wish to provide comments or questions before I invite the mover to close debate? None. In that case, I'll pass it on to Councillor Navard, I believe was the mover, if you have any further comments or questions.
No, I think that we've had such a marathon effort, and I can only endorse the efforts of all the people involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, I'll now put the overall substantive motion as amended by the 3 amending motions to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridland, how do you wish to vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland, and that is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors, and I think we can invite the Mayor and the other and Councillor Wall and Councillor Choi back.
Can you breathe now? Can you hear all right then?
Hi, you've called Glenn. I'm on the phone at the moment. If you leave a message, I'll give you a call back. Thanks. Bye. Hello? Hello? much.
You're back online. Thank you, Councillor Cridland.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so thank you folks. Everyone's back with us now. We'll now move on to the second item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, which is item 10.5.4, annual review of council delegations. There's an officer recommendation before us, and I'm also aware that Councillor Russell has an amended motion. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? I guess I will. Does anyone wish to second the officer recommendation?
I'm happy to second it.
I think Councillor Cridland was first there, so Councillor Cridland seconding, thank you. All right, let me just grab my speaking notes. Okay, so the officer recommendation went before the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting 2 weeks ago, and the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee unanimously endorsed the officer recommendation. The City has a statutory obligation under Section 546, subsection 2 of the Local Government Act to review its delegations at least once every financial year. That's probably about as much as I'll say to the officer recommendation itself. I am aware that Councillor Russell has that amended motion. I'll ask Councillor Cridland if he's got anything to say as seconder. Otherwise, I'll throw over to Councillor Russell for his amended motion. Councillor Cridland, did you wish to speak as seconder?
Only that this is something that we have to do, and because it's important that we keep an eye on what our delegations are. That's all I wish to say.
All right, thank you, Councillor Cridland. Just a reminder to those in the gallery that photography is not permitted. And Councillor Russell, did you wish to move your amended motion at this stage?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So that for item 1 and 2, other than DC 690, the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee recommends to Council that it, 1, notes that in accordance with section 5.462 of the Local Government Act 1995, the following delegations to the CEO and or city officers as shown in attachment A have been reviewed with no changes being proposed. I won't go through all those other than to say that D690 Town Planning Scheme 6 has been removed. 2, notes that in accordance with section 5.462 of the Local Government Act 1995, the following delegation to the CEO as shown at attachment B have been reviewed with major changes being proposed, and again, I won't go through those. And the new amendment 3 notes that in accordance with section 5.462 of the Local Government Act 1995 delegation DC 690 Town Planning Scheme 6 to the Chief Executive Officer shall be amended as follows. 1, Roman numeral 1. Inclusion of 3E to state applications for heritage listed properties or areas other than city deemed minor alterations that do not impair the heritage elements of the property or area. Roman 2. Inclusion of 3F to state applications where the proposed development from a non-public entity results in the permanent development or utilisation of city-owned lands or lands vested in the city to manage, at-grade crossovers or utility services are excluded. Roman numeral 3. Inclusion of 3G to state applications resulting in a cash in lieu as a condition of approval. Roman numeral 4. Inclusion of 3H to state applications for signage within residential zone lots or within non-residential zone lots opposite, in brackets directly or diagonally, to or adjoining a residential zone lot. Roman numeral 5. Inclusion of 3I to state when during the advertising period the Mayor or 2 councillors have requested that the application be referred to Council for determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll see about a seconder now. Does anyone wish to second Councillor Russell's amended motion? Councillor Navard. As well, Councillor Russell, the floor is yours to specify your reasons.
Well, I'm quite happy to go with the reasons that Councillor Russell has set out. I think it's a long night, and so
Thank you, Councillor Navard. You've seconded it, but it's actually Councillor Russell that speaks first.
sorry,
You've
sorry.
just indicated that you're going to second it. So, Councillor Russell, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So the reasons for change are as follows. Yes, that for items 3 Roman numeral 1 to 3 Roman numeral 4, the determination of applications need to consider the expectations of the community as a due regard consideration as laid out in the deemed provisions for local planning scheme. With respect to the city, this is best addressed via council and therefore the purpose of these amendments. And 2, with regards to 3 Roman numeral 5, it is the opinion that elected members as decision makers should have the authority to call in applications where they deem appropriate. This should be considered as a mandatory clause for any decision-making body which delegates its authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Navard, is there anything that you wish to say as seconder?
No, other than I'm sorry I confused you. However, I do think all of these ones are very worthy adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amended motion? I might say a few words. So I don't so much speak against the content of the amended motion as put up my hands and say I have not had an opportunity to get across the detail of it. The first notice I had of this amended motion was Sunday. The latest version of the amended motion, if I'm not mistaken, came in at 11 a.m. this morning. Like, I suspect, many councillors, I've been focused on some of the very, very consequential items on tonight's agenda, such as Collier Park Village and Local Planning Scheme 7. I've also been focused on Thursday night's special council meeting concerning the recreation and aquatic facility. I'm not across the detail of this amended motion. With the best will in the world, I haven't had an opportunity to properly consider what the consequences of Councillor Russell's proposed changes might be. I can only assume that I'm not the only councillor in that boat. I suppose I'm not speaking against the amended motion in the sense that I disagree with what Councillor Russell has put down here. I just don't know what the effect is going to be, and I can't at this point in time support it. Instead, I'm going to propose that we pass the officer recommendation unamended for now and satisfy our obligations under section 5.46 subsection 2 of the Local Government Act for now. If Councillor Russell or indeed any other councillor wants to subsequently make amendments to any of the city's delegations, passing the officer recommendation tonight won't impact their ability to do that in the future. But I can't in good conscience vote for changes to our delegations that I haven't had time to properly consider, but I'm all for considering it in a more timely fashion at another meeting. That's all I've got to say. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the amended motion? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this motion. These amendments address some issues that we've actually had before us, and they are important to the community. Some of these issues here should be a lot more transparent. So, you know, for instance, we're looking at heritage listed properties. We're talking about cash in lieu as a condition for approval. These things are actually really quite important that we are informed, it's brought to council, that it's actually also brought to the attention of the community, and that we actually do provide transparency around some of these requirements. The at-grade crossovers for utility services as well, yes, exclusion, so that's fine. I don't think there's anything too contentious on here, but I think there are a couple of items on here which we've seen before, and it's raised a bit of concern and a lot of conversation. So I'd be very happy to support these. I realise we've all had a very busy night and had a lot to read through, but I don't have any concerns with these items being amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amended motion? Councillor Choi?
I just have a question, if I may.
By all means.
Since you started it with your commentary, can I please ask the City Administration what implications are any with this amendment tonight, please, in respect to this delegation?
Who should I send that to? Is that Mr Adams or
I might start a little
Mr Bradford?
Yeah. We haven't had a whole heap of time to assess all of the implications of this, in particular how many additional applications this would mean being considered by council or any other impacts. And so that is something we haven't done in detail. Ms Gins, have you got anything to add to that?
No, unfortunately not.
And so our recommendation or advice was that this be dealt with separately to this review if there were changes, so we can give full consideration to it.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Choi, another question or to speak?
Another question, please, if I may, Mr Mayor, following on from that question, and thank you through the Chair, Mr CEO, for that response. So I'm just wondering then, in terms of the appropriate forum, would this sort of amendment normally go to the Audit Risk Governance Committee first before it would come to council? And in this case, that hasn't happened, is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the amended motion who hasn't already spoken? That's a no. Oh, Councillor Russell, a question, because you have moved it.
Yes, I know. A question, please. So if this amendment gets approved, then does the city compromise its obligations under section 5.46(2) of the Local Government Act?
Who should I direct that question to? Mr Adams?
So I'm not sure that we'd be compromising any of the review. I think the issue is that we haven't fully evaluated what the impacts of putting these amendments into the delegation would be, and I don't think any of us are in a position at this point in time to be able to provide that advice. Probably the best way to deal with it would be through bringing it back to council at a later date with all the information available.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against the amended motion and has not already spoken? Councillor D'Souza. I'll come to you next, Councillor Cridland. I think Councillor D'Souza just beat you to the punch there.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Milner. Look, I'll be speaking against. I can't evaluate whether or not it's meritorious. I'm sure there are some good points in Councillor Russell's amending motion, but like most of us tonight, I suspect that almost all of our time has been consumed with the LPS 7 over the past few days. That's the first point. Secondly, I think this should, in terms of due process, come through the Audit Risk and Governance Committee, where we could debate potential amendments to the delegations there, as we normally do. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting Councillor Russell's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Cridland, let us know if you're speaking either for or against, and the floor is yours.
I'm speaking against, and I'm speaking against the amendment at this stage, and it sounds like none of us have done our homework because we haven't really properly considered this particular one, but I do think we've got a decent reason for that, and that is because we have had so much going on of really great significance to the city and to the council, and people have been working very hard. It's been just about worn out my printer printing out all the amendments to the particular items that we've already dealt with tonight. So I just have not properly considered this, and I can't, without the city having given some advice, support it at this stage. I expect that there are some very good, in fact, perhaps it's all very good, and I would suggest that perhaps Councillor Russell brings this back as a separate item, his own motion soon, or maybe sticks it through the Audit, Risk and Governance, whatever he likes, but just not tonight. There is one matter in there which I think perhaps already includes something that he and I have spoken about, and that's 3 Roman 2, and that relates to the frustration of both Councillor Russell and myself having sat on JDAPs where there has been a transfer of wealth effectively when private developers are able to utilise the public realm to stick their on-street car parking off their site and into the public realm where trees should be growing. And perhaps that's what 3 Roman 2 is aimed at, getting us to have a bit of a say in that. But maybe I'm misunderstanding it too. So I just would like a little bit more time and, I mean, mental resources to consider this, because maybe there's something in there I don't like. Don't know. Sorry I've waffled, but I'm encouraging Councillor Russell to bring this back just a little bit later when we have more energy. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against the amended motion who hasn't spoken already? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I consider that these amendments may very well be meritorious, and I'm not speaking against it for that reason, the motion, but considering the usual process as the officers have outlined tonight, I would probably prefer to wait until the next Audit Risk Governance Committee meeting with an officer's comprehensive report provided therein. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillors, is there Councillor Navard, a question?
Move forward when people are suggesting that they would like potentially a deferment.
Who should I send that question to?
It should put it on the agenda for the Audit Risk and Governance Committee, and that's the process by which it would normally be dealt with. And really, the Audit Risk and Governance Committee is a working committee that can work through these sorts of matters before they come to Council.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Another question, Councillor Choi?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just following on from Councillor Navard's question, so if this motion fails, does that mean that the result of this discussion means that this motion will automatically be listed in the next Audit Risk Governance Committee meeting, or how? I think that's maybe what Councillor Navard was going to.
Yes,
or
we can.
Does someone have to raise something here to do that?
No, we will bring it onto the next Audit Risk and Governance Committee meeting.
Thank you. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amended motion who hasn't already spoken? No. Okay. Councillor Russell, you are the mover of the amended motion. You have an opportunity to wind up if you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've just counted the numbers. We have a cast-in vote, so I don't think there's any kind of reply. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Russell. So I'm now about to put the amended motion to the vote, just so everyone's on the same page. This isn't the substantive, which is currently the officer recommendation. This is a vote on whether or not we want to amend the officer recommendation in line with Councillor Russell's amended motion. So that's what's going to the vote now, Councillor Russell's amended motion. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridland, how would you like to vote on that?
I vote no.
All right. So the amended motion has been lost 2 votes to 6 for the benefit of those who are listening via live streaming. Those in favour were, here we are, Councillor Russell and Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Those against were myself, Mayor Greg Milner, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Warland, Councillor Choi, Councillor Navard and Councillor Cridland. Okay, so we now revert to the substantive motion, which is the officer recommendation. Is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Cridland, do you wish to speak at all?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, if with no one wanting to speak, I don't have anything to say by way of winding up. The situation's pretty clear. I'll simply put the officer recommendation to the vote. And how would you like to vote on the officer recommendation, Councillor Cridland?
I vote yes.
Okay, so that was, the officer recommendation was passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That concludes item 10. We now move on to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Councillors, I have received a leave of absence request from Councillor Ken Manolis for the period of 28 March 2023 to 30 April 2023 inclusive. Does anyone else have a leave of absence application that they would like to submit? Councillor Russell.
Yes, thank you. From the 8th of April to the 16th of April inclusive.
So that's the 8th of April to the 16th of April inclusive. All right. Anyone else? Councillor Cridland, any leave of absence applications?
No.
All right. In that case, I'm about to call for a mover that the leave of absence applications received from Councillor Ken Manolis for the period of 28 March 2023 to 30 April 2023 inclusive, and from Councillor Stephen Russell for 8 April 2023 to 16 April 2023 inclusive be granted. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, seconded by Councillor Choi. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridland, how would you like to vote on that?
I vote yes.
All right. Okay, so that was passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. There's nil for this evening. Item 13 is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. And responses to questions from members taken on notice at the February 2023 Ordinary Council meeting can be found in the appendix of this agenda. Item 13.2 is questions from members itself. So, councillors, are there any questions for the administration this evening? Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question this evening. It's on behalf of Mr. Antonio Parascandola of 18 Danny Drive, Manning. Mr. Parascandola was late last year attacked by a dog along Danny Drive and was hospitalised for 2 nights. He's reported this issue of the dog on 7 separate occasions with the city, ranging from 21 November to 25th December of 2022. And I've also raised this through the council request system multiple times. I'm just seeking clarity as to what action the city can or will consider taking to rectify the situation.
Ms. Tucker, should I send that your way?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. As you mentioned, you raised this in a council inquiry and a response was provided to you. And we've also been communicating with that complainant in relation to the dog attack, and it's ongoing at this point in time. So the Rangers are communicating with that person.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? Councillor Russell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I note that the city's urban forest strategy 2018 to 2023 is to expire this year. Could the city advise its future intent with respect to the review and revision of this document?
Ms. Ampremo, should I send that your way? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Councillor Russell, we are currently considering how we might scope and approach that review, given that we need to balance our ability to meet managing the existing public open space and streetscape canopy and the budget provisions for that. And we're conscious that how we approach reviewing the urban forest strategy needs to be in a way that's mindful of something that could be affordable. So we're currently considering the best way to approach that, taking account of not creating a community expectation that we're unable to meet.
Thank you, Ms. Ampremo. Another question there, Councillor Russell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This actually goes to a question from the public this evening. So, under the Planning and Development Regs, Clause 13, Heritage Conservation Notice, it states, if the local government forms the view that a heritage place is not being properly maintained, the local government may give to a person who is the owner or occupier of the heritage place a written notice requiring the person to carry out specified repairs to the heritage place by a specific time. And it goes on. So, so basically, a heritage place under the regs includes a local government heritage list, and therefore category B buildings within the city. So can the city not therefore use these powers under the planning regs to effect repairs to the category B buildings at 50 Dyson Street?
Who should I send that to? Mr. Giddens? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. I'll do my best to answer that, Councillor Russell. Yes, we were looking at that clause as we were speaking the answers to the question time earlier this evening, and in theory, yes, that would appear the case. I think the fact that there is a live development application for this particular site, I think we will explore that opportunity to see how far down the track that is. That closes on the 5th of April, I think, the consultation period. But certainly we can raise that with the compliance people. We have actually already been in touch with the owner of the property, and they have tried to secure that front door, which has the damage to it. So we have actually already approached them, but naturally there's probably a little bit more to do, and they're obviously waiting to get the development application approved and then improve the building and convert it into the daycare centre that they want it to be. But thank you for the question.
Okay, so just for clarification, the city does have the powers under the planning and develop regs to effect a repair notice on a Class B heritage listed site within the city.
Mr. Giddens?
My understanding is yes, but we'll take that on notice and I'll confirm that for you and get that in writing to you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddens. Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? Councillor Choi.
Oh yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not sure if anyone else watched 60 Minutes the last couple of days, in particular on TikTok and the implications of access to such social media sites using government facilities. I'm just wondering, is there any such policy that needs to be thought about or included on a strategic risk register or operational? I'm not sure.
Should I send that one to, I wonder? Mr. Adams?
We do have policies on use of our assets in terms of for public use for IT, but I'm not sure of the exact detail of what's in there with regard to TikTok, so I'll take it on notice and get back to you.
I can say we don't use TikTok as one of our social media channels for the city.
Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? Councillor Cridland?
No, none from me, thank you.
All right. I've got one, and I do apologise if it was covered during the discussion on Local Planning Scheme 7. I wasn't in the chamber, so I'm not sure what might have been covered and what not. I am aware that the Manning Menshed members have been expressing concerns about their tenure. I'm not going to ask about the zoning because that was dealt with by council earlier this evening, but I am going to ask what the tenure of that particular block of land is, who owns it. I thought it was owned by the Crown, but I could be mistaken. And I guess what is there any justification for the fear that, as I seem to be seeing from these emails, concerned about losing their tenure? I'm not sure if that's to Mr. Giddens or Mr. Quigley, but and feel free to take it on notice if because it is a question of some importance.
We'll take that question on notice. Thanks.
No problem. Councillors, any other questions for the administration this evening? No. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature, introduced by decision of the meeting. There's nil this evening. And item 15 brings us to meeting closed to the public. So this is where we need to close the doors, unfortunately, because there are some things that we need to deal with behind closed doors. Thank you all for your attendance this evening. To those of you who are listening via live streaming or YouTube, thank you for joining us and for listening this evening. We will be we'll be terminating that, or at least muting that feed very shortly. Bear with us. And I'll just wait until governance can confirm that we are indeed offline. Oh, I should probably move that as a motion. So I'll move that. Can I have a seconder to close the meeting to the public? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And Councillor Cridland, how do you vote on closing the meeting to the public? And we've lost Councillor Cridland. Well, let's take this opportunity to get him back online. We've got 7 votes, so I presume we can call that carried. Councillor Devard? Yes, I think that's a very good idea, actually. Let's have a 5-minute adjournment for people to freshen up. It has been a long meeting. Good idea, Councillor Devard. I'll see everyone back here at 9:02. that motion. I always forget that, don't I? So that brings us to item 6. Do I need to read the votes of the previous confidential items? All right, so for the benefit of the minutes, on item 15.1.1, the officer recommendation was carried 7 votes to 1. And on item 15.1.2, the matter was deferred until the May ordinary council meeting. That brings us to item 16, which is closure. Before I close the meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation this evening. I declare the meeting closed at 6:26 p.m. Thank you all. Sorry, what did I say? It's been a long night. So 9:26 p.m. All right. And I was doing so well.
After midnight.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all and good night.